How will you assist with skilled workforce initiatives?
Well, I've got an awful lot of money passed in Washington to improve the training opportunities available for people who need to improve their skills or develop new skills. And we've gotten an awful lot of that, millions and millions of dollars back here to this district. It is very, very important for our schools to have the money they need to beef up their math and science courses at every level. And we have fully funded No Child Left Behind, but that is not enough. We have to add funding that can go to individual schools that have individual plans to improve their programs so children will learn more.
I can't let it go by the statement that we fully funded No Child Left Behind. The experience and the numbers say something dramatically different. There was a certain amount of money authorized for No Child Left Behind, and the Hartford Current and every other major newspaper reported this year that Connecticut saw an $18 million cut below the amount that was initially authorized. School districts will tell you something very different about the money that they're receiving under No Child Left Behind, which goes to basic educational programs, but also to job training programs in high schools, than the situation in which Congresswoman presents us today.
Let me just say the federal numbers make very, very clear that we have funded what we mandated in No Child Left Behind, which was testing. What we need is more money for the rest of the testing and Title I. What we need is more flexible money for our schools to do a better job, to have the money to make change and enrich their programs. And that's what I'm interested in, and that's what I've been working on. And I'm pleased that between the increases in the special ed funding and the increases in Title I, we at least are laying a better foundation for our schools.
Listen, my schools in my district are very misinformed if all they've been mandated to do is testing. They make it sound as if it's a little bit more than testing. In fact, there are schools throughout the state that are being put on this do not succeed list, who are then being mandated to improve and not given the resources to improve. The mandate is not just testing. It is much broader than that, and we've got to support schools that fulfill those requirements.
What do you think our exit strategy in Iraq should be?
Well, first of all, it's time for the Iraqis for the Iraqi government to take care of its own. It's time for the Iraqi government to stop the slaughter that's going on in the streets of Baghdad. That is not something we can do. It is not something we should do. It is something they must do. Now, you see a lot of new strategies being tried out. President Maliki was talking about a new strategy the other day. Our people are looking at new strategies, but it's they that have to get this done. We can help. We've got to stand up Iraqi troops more effectively. We've got to help with new tactical and strategic thinking. We have to help by getting greater regional support for them. And we have to win in Iraq against Al-Qaeda, because if we don't, Al-Qaeda will spread more rapidly and be a tremendous danger to all of us. They have said this is the battleground. I would rather the battleground was there than the battleground was New York City. But it is a battleground nonetheless on which we have to win, and we can help our Iraqi colleagues stand up the army they need and develop the backbone they need, but they must do it.
Congresswoman Johnson is quite right. We do have a battle with Al-Qaeda in Iraq. We didn't until we went in.
Thank you.
Al-Qaeda wasn't in Iraq. The fight wasn't on the ground in Iraq until we made that fight there. And the question about what we do next has to also be about how we got there. And this Congress has been a rubber stamp on the president's policies in Iraq going in from pretty much day one. And a lot of the chaos that exists right now, the tragic loss of life, not only from Iraqi civilians and troops on the ground, but our own troops there, are due to the fact that we made some political decisions on how to conduct that war rather than military decisions. Why do you see a historic number of retired military leaders coming out and criticizing the conduct of this war? Because they told this president that we needed to increase our troop levels. They told this president that we needed to properly equip our troops going in. And unfortunately, this president didn't listen. Not only did this president not listen, but he dealt with a Congress that decided not to ask any questions going forward. Now, it is absolutely unacceptable what is happening there today. And our missteps and our mismanagement of that war have in part dictated the chaos and emerging civil war that's there. But we absolutely have to talk about what we do next. We can cry over the spilled milk on the ground, or we can start setting a plan. And as Congressman Johnson says, we need to tell the Iraqis that they need to stand up for themselves. But we can't do that until we give them a sense of when that's going to happen. Now, I don't stand here and tell you that I think in the midst of this campaign we should set a deadline or a line in the sand, but I absolutely think that we should engage in a conversation with the Iraqis, a dialogue with the Iraqis, on when we are going to draw down the multitude of the majority of our forces there. They will never stand up for themselves. They will never get their act together, root out the corruption that exists within their forces, unless we tell them, give them an idea, at the very least, of when that time is going to be.
How would you balance the need to protect the public against terrorism and individual freedom and the right to privacy?
I think there's no doubt that the most important job of the next Congress and the next Congressperson for this district is to protect this country from attack. But I think we've been given a false construct by this administration and many members of Congress that there has to, in every instance, be a choice between protecting this country and upholding basic civil liberties. One of the most important things about trying to root out terrorism around this globe is understanding where it is. Al-Qaeda and a gentleman named Osama bin Laden attacked this country on September 11th. And yet, you haven't heard a lot about them recently because we have focused so much of our energy on one part of this world, in Iraq. And yet what we know now from the 16 most important and influential intelligence agencies in this country is that the focus that we've had on Iraq has actually strengthened terrorism. We may have plugged a few holes in the Al-Qaeda leadership, but we've actually created a breeding ground and training ground for terrorists. We should absolutely give this administration every tool we need to go after those terrorists. We should make sure that our military intervention around the globe is hunting down terrorists wherever they are. But in the end, there is certainly a way to break down that false choice that we are given between civil liberties and protecting this nation, to make sure that our privacy rights are still upheld, while at the same time we are making sure we do everything we can to find the terrorists who may cause harm to us and stop them before they attack us again.
You know, I spend a lot of time talking to groups all over the 41 towns of the 5th District, Rotaries, Lions, women's groups, church groups, talking to individuals, going door to door. And for everyone I meet, number one is security. And don't believe for a minute that you can live in a world of cell phones and internet and not have to make some new decisions about what it takes to be secure. Our intelligence law requires that if the analyst in the field sees a number from Al-Qaeda calling into America, he needs to be able to pick up that phone and listen. But under the FISA court law, that's the intelligence court, he has to convince his superiors, he has to fill out some paperwork, those lawyers have to go to the Justice Department lawyers, and the Justice Department lawyers go to the Attorney General. Once the Attorney General says, yes, you've got a case, then the accelerated provision allows the analyst to pick up the phone at that point and before the court approves the case. But the predecessor to the Attorney General making the decision is the FISA application, and that can take days, weeks, or even months, because it requires a lot of things to be proved. So what I believe we need is the right to tap the organization, not the phone. The Patriot Act gave us the right to tap the person, not the individual cell phone, because we know we have to do that, to follow that for drug crimes and for other crimes. So all we did in the international surveillance arena was to give very limited, careful rights to the government to tap the Al-Qaeda and terrorist organizations associated with Al-Qaeda when their number called into America. And we had to do it, and I stand by it, and it's the right balance, and it's the security of our country.
I'll use just 1 minute of my bank time because obviously this race has drawn a lot of attention because of some attack ads that Congressman Johnson has aired on the subject. And I think it's important to note that in all the paperwork that Congressman Johnson talks about, it's probably useful to actually read the FISA law to understand that the FISA law doesn't require all of the paperwork and all the internal procedural checks within the administration. Those are barriers to moving forward that have been set up by the Attorney General's office, have been set up by this administration. Expert after expert has testified before Congress that you can get that sign-off immediately if you, on your own, regardless of the act, cut down on that paperwork. And the suggestion that Congressman Johnson has made in advertisements that somehow there is this mountain of paperwork that becomes a barrier to that interception of the communication is a problem mainly within the administration, this Republican administration, not within the FISA Act, which has been in operation for almost 30 years.